Howdy, howdy, my fellow gamers, and welcome back to another episode of Storytime with Freak. I know, 2 episodes in 1 week, what? But I mean, let's be honest, that other episode doesn't really count. It was 1 chapter. It was 17 minutes long, but I figured, hey, we'll try to get you another chapter, maybe 2, maybe 3 today, depending how short they are. And then I gotta get cracking on editing this Rainbow Six Siege video, but, you know, I wanted to give you guys the content that you wanted with some story time. So let's just take a quick gander here. Okay, this is kind of a long chapter. Holy crap, it's a decent length chapter. So we might just be doing one chapter today. But so I'm thinking what I'm gonna do, guys, after we finish the toll. Of course, I already mentioned it a few episodes ago, but we're gonna take like a month off of story times, where we're gonna focus 100% on gaming content, let's plays, funny moments, all that good jazz. And then I'm thinking we might still take a little bit of time off from story time because I might just record the whole book in one go. That way I can consistently just schedule them to upload twice a week instead of going, oh shit, I haven't recorded yet. Let's record it, let's edit, let's upload it. That way it's consistent for you guys and you know when you're going to get it. I'm not 100% on that idea though, because, you know, it's still going to take me a while to read through the whole book, because reading out loud is just so much slower. But without further ado, I'm just going to stop rambling on and I'm going to read chapter 35, Requiem, in 10 parts. 1. Introitus. It begins with hushed anticipation. The conductor stands, hand poised, all eyes on the wand as its downstroke will bring a dark magic. Today's piece is an orchestral wonder, a requiem conceived of and performed by sibilant followers of the tone, the thunder, and the martyred toll. A requiem performed in response to the mile-high gleaning an ocean away. Can you hear it now, ringing forth in the streets of Port Remembrance, a wordless, tongueless mass of mortality in an immortal world? Sweeping strains of fire and brimstone, but mostly fire. These sibilants are well prepared for the music they will deliver today, and for those who hear it, there will be no deliverance. 2. Dice Aire. Fire trucks were all automated, yet they were still designed to require a human at the wheel, for the Thunderhead had planned it that way. Of course, if the human made a wrong turn, the truck would override the human and correct the error. The fire chief of Port Remembrance thought about that often. Before he became chief, he would intentionally make mistakes while driving his rig just to entertain himself to see how long it took to get the course correction to register, and for the truck to get itself back on track. Thunderhead could use robots to do the job of firefighters, he supposed, but the Thunderhead had never been too keen on robots. It only used them for mindless labor that no one else wanted. And so firefighters were still firefighters, but that didn't mean they had much to do, because whenever a fire started, the Thunderhead always saw but when it was little more than a spark. It was usually able to put it out. It was only one of those rare occasions that it could not, the firefighters were called in, although the chief had come to believe that Thunderhead started safe fires just to give them something to do. At 6:30 in the evening, an alarm went off in the firehouse. It used to be that Thunderhead would talk to them and explain the nuances of the situation that they were about to get into. Now it just sounded an alarm, programmed their GPSs, and let them figure out the rest for themselves. Today's alarm was strange, however. There was no destination set on their screens. The garage doors didn't roll up, but still the alarm blared. It was only when the door to the firehouse blew off its hinges and figures began to race in that the firefighters realized that the alarm was not a fire alert. It was to warn them that they were under attack. Tonists! Dozens of them spilled through the door, all letting off a nasty bee-like droning sound. The Tonists had weapons, and the men and women of their unit were simply not prepared for the unexpected day of wrath. The fire chief stood in astonishment. He wanted to defend them, but how? With what? No one ever attacked a firefighter, except for maybe the occasional scythe. But when a scythe attacked, you got gleaned. End of story. You didn't fight back, you didn't struggle. But this was very different. These Tonists were rendering people deadish left and right, and no one knew what to do. Think, he told himself. Think! He was trained to fight fires, not people. Think, there has to be something I could do. And then it came to him. Fire axes. They had fire axes. He ran across the garage to grab one, but could he actually use it against another human being? He'd have to, because he wasn't about to let these sibilants render his entire unit deadish. Just then, the Tonist began throwing rocks at the trucks. One came in the chief's direction, and he caught it before it could hit him. It wasn't exactly a rock, though. First of all, it was metallic and had hard ridges. He'd seen something like this before in history books. Think, what was it called? Oh, right, a grenade. And in an instant, there was nothing more for the chief to think about. 3. Confrontatus. Highblade Tenkaminen was a deliberate man. He only appeared to be impulsive and flip when in fact everything about his life was planned and organized. Even the chaos of his lunar jubilees was a controlled chaos. He suspected that time was of the essence after the urgent warning call from his father, but it was impossible for him to fight his own instincts. He had quickly retreated to his humble residence, where he struggled with his valet to figure out what he needed to take with him for a hasty escape. A second robe, of course, but should it be one for cold weather or warm? Who should be notified that they were leaving? Highblades couldn't just vanish. He found himself confounded by it all. Your Excellency, said the valet, didn't you say that we were in a hurry? Yes, of course. And there were things of sentimental value that absolutely had to come with him. The engraved obsidian revolver given to him by Grand Slayer Nzinga the day he took her place as High Blade. The silver dagger he'd used for his first gleaning. If this place was about to be overrun, who knew if he'd ever see his prized possessions again? He absolutely had to take them. For 10 minutes he obsessed over what he should and should not take, and only stopped by the first distant explosion. 4. Lacrimosa. If we're leaving, we should leave now. Anastasia paced the grand hall beneath the place's central dome with Jerry, waiting for everyone else to show. Where the hell are Tenkamen and the others? Maybe you're overreacting, said Jerry. I've had dealings with many Tonists, and never once have I known them to be violent. Annoying and strident, but never violent. You didn't see these Tonists, Anastasia said, and if Tenkamen thinks they're up to something, I believe him. Then let's leave without him, Jerry offered. Let him and the others catch up to us. I'm not about to leave him, Anastasia said. Just then a series of far-off explosions echoed through the grand atrium. They both stopped to listen. More explosions filled the air like distant thunder. Wherever it is, said Jerry, it's not here in the palace. No, but it's going to be. Anastasia knew that whatever those explosions were, it was an omen of worse to come, an angry promise that this day would most certainly end in tears. 5. Sanctus. The young Tonist was a loyal follower. She did what her curate told her to do because he was a true man of the tone. Holy and sanctified, their curate had not spoken for many years, and on the day of the great resonance, the day the thunderhead went silent, he was the first to surrender his tongue. Words lied, words connived, they dissembled with impunity, they slandered, and above all, they offended the purity of the tone. One by one, all the Tonists in their order had made a vow of a permanent one, as their curate had. Not a vow of silence, but a vow of vowels. A complete surrendering of the harsh, unnatural clicks, hisses, and pops that consonants brought. Language was the enemy of the Tonists. This was their sect believed. Of course, there were other Tonists who did not, but they would soon see the light, even the ones who had blinded themselves. While one team took out the Firehouse, and another the peace officers' precinct, their curate led against the largest team to the palace. They all had weapons, the kind that common citizens weren't supposed to have. They had been given them by an unknown benefactor, a secret supporter of their cause. The Tonists were not trained in these weapons, but what did it matter? Swing the blade, pull the trigger, hurl the grenade, and press the detonator. With so many of them armed, they didn't need to be that skilled to achieve their goal. And they also had kerosene. Jugs and jugs of it. The Tonist made sure she was part of the first wave. She was frightened, but also joyous for her part in this. Now was their time. In the wake of the mile-high gleaning, the ire against Scythe was at a full boil. People would finally see the Tonist way. They would cheer for what would be done here today, and the Sub-Saharan region would be a klaxon calling out to the rest of the world, waking them into the glory of the tone, toll, and thunder. All rejoice! She opened her mouth to intone as she neared the palace, and others enjoined her. It was so satisfying to be the one who started them intoning. They were of one mind, one spirit, one chord. Then, climbing on the backs of her brethren, she and dozens of others began to scale the palace wall. 6. Agnes Dye. Anastasia and Jerry, with Seiss Makeda and Baba close behind, finally met up with Tenkamen in the Rose Garden, halfway between the palace and his cottage. His valet was struggling with a large rolling suitcase that wouldn't roll over the pebbles of the narrow garden path. We've called for the helicopter, Seiss Makeda informed everyone, but it will take at least 10 minutes to get here from the airport. And that's only if the pilot isn't off in some bar, Baba added, like he has the last time. It will be fine, Tenkamen said out of breath. It will come for us and everything will be fine. Then he turned to lead everyone toward the heliport, which was off the property's west lawn. Around them, the entire compound was in motion. Palace staff hurried going this way and that, and their arms full of belongings. The Blade Guard were flooding out of the barracks and taking strategic positions, something they had probably done only in exercises. And then they heard the noise from the west, a chorus of droning voices, each one hitting a different discordant monotone, and figures began drooping over the western wall. We're too late, said Tenkamen, halting them in their tracks. Alarms began to blare, and all around them the Blade Guard took immediate action, firing on the invading force, adding to the sound of gunfire to the cacophony. Tonist fell left and right, but for every one the guards took down, 2 more scaled the wall. It wouldn't be long before the guards were overwhelmed. These sibilants were armed with more than rocks, and they used their weapons against the guards with such brutality it was shocking. Where the hell did they get these kinds of weapons? Didn't Tonism espouse inner peace and stoic acceptance? That which comes can't be avoided, Anastasia mumbled. It was the Tonist's favorite mantra, and suddenly it took up a terrible new meaning. The heavy south gate was blown off its hinges by an explosion, and as the gates fell, a mob of Tonists pushed through. They cut through the line of Blade Guards in seconds and began throwing what looked like bottles of alcohol with burning rags shoved in them. Fire broke out everywhere the bottles crashed. They mean to burn us so we can't be revived, said Baba, near panic, just like Scythe Lucifer did. Anastasia wanted to snap at Baba for even mentioning Rowan at the same time of the twisted sect of Tonists, but she stopped herself. As the battle spilled onto the heliport ahead of them, Tenkamen had them change direction. The east patio, he said. There's more than enough space for the helicopter to land there. Come. They doubled back, crossing the rose garden, getting scraped, scratched, and poked by the thorns along the way. But even before they reached the east patio, they could see that this end of the compound had also been breached. Tonists were everywhere, attacking people running out of the staff house, chasing them down, and rendering them mercilessly deadish. Why are they attacking the palace staff, said Anastasia. What possible reason could they have? They are without reason, said Scythe Makeda. Without reason, conscience, or decency. Their server, who was so particular about the placement of silverware, was felled by a knife in the back. That's when Baba turned on Ten Commandant. You should have fortified, he yelled, added another garrison of Blade Guard, or even gleaned this pack of Tonus before they could launch an attack on us. This is all your fault. Ten Commandant balled his hands into fists and stormed toward Baba, but Jerry got between them. You can salvage your egos later, Jerry said, but first we have to live if you're going to have this fight. Anastasia looked around. They were under the cover of darkness, so had not yet been spotted, but that wouldn't last long as the fires grew. And then, as if the commotion around them wasn't enough, a new sort of droning filled the air. This one from actual drones. From the sky descended a swarm of ambi-drones. They had been mobilized from the nearest survival center when people began to go deadish. They zeroed in on the bodies laying on the grass and on the pavement. Tonists, blade guards, palace staff, they didn't differentiate between the dead and the deadish. They scooped them up in their insect-like pincers, carrying them off for revival. There's our ticket, said Scythe Baba. Who needs a helicopter? And without waiting for the High Blade's leave, Baba ran across the field towards the closest ambi-drone like a lamb to the slaughter. Ahmad, no! Called Ten Commandant, but Baba was already committed and wasn't turning back. The moment the Tonus saw his Scythe's robe, they shifted gears and raced after Baba, intercepting him. He pulled out blades from his robe, took Tonus down all around him, but it was no use. They overwhelmed him, threw him on the ground, and attacked him with everything they had, including his own weapons. Scythe Makeda tried to go after him, but Anastasia stopped her. There's nothing we can do for him now. Makeda nodded, but didn't take her eyes off of her fallen comrade. He may be the luckiest of us, she said. If they've killed him, the drones will get him. They'll carry him off to be revived. But the drones did not go after him. There were so many other bodies around the compound they were already committed, and to an ambi-drone, one body was no different from another. And that's when Anastasia realized they're killing the staff to tie up the drones so that there won't be any left to go after the scythes. And with no drone to carry Baba away, the Tonus grabbed his body and dragged him toward a flaming pyre that would reduce him to unrevivable ash. They hurled him upon it, and the flames surged. To the palace, said Ten Commandant, and once more led the way as if somehow being in motion made them any less trapped. 7. Benedictus. They piled into the palace, where half a dozen blade guards closed the ponderous bronze doors behind them and took up defensive positions should the Tonus break through. At last there was a blessed moment of peace, a blessed moment to strategize within the madness. It could mean the difference between living or dying as ignobly as poor Scythe Baba. Although the palace had many windows, they all faced the central atrium, which meant that the High Blade's pleasure dome was also a mighty fortress. The question was, how mighty? They must have gathered every sibilant in Sub-Sahara for this, said Scythe Makeda. It will be all right, Ten Commandant insists. The peace officers of Port Remembrance will arrive to fight alongside the Blade Guard, and the city's firefighters will douse the flames. All will be well. They should have been here by now, said Scythe Makeda. Why don't we hear sirens? It was Anastasia, insightful as ever, who burst their bubble. The first explosion, she said. The far-off ones. What about them? Some Ten Commandant almost threateningly, fighting for his tether of safety. Well, if I wanted to wage an illegal attack, she said, the first thing I would do would be to take out the peace officers and the firefighters. And the truth of it left them all in silence, until Ten Commandant turned to his valet, who was silently wringing his hands in terror. Where are my things? I'm sorry, Your Excellency. I left the suitcase in the rose garden. Jerry glared at the High Blade. We're all about to be incinerated, and you're worried about your things? But before the High Blade could respond, a flaming truck crashed through the massive bronze windows of the palace. The doors fell off their hinges, crushing 4 blade guards beneath them, and the Tonus began to flood in. That's when Jerry grabbed Anastasia and pulled her behind a column hidden from everyone's view. I have an idea, Jerry said, but you'll have to trust me. 8. Offertorium. The sibilant curate was in his element. This is what he was born for. This was his purpose, and had been his plan for years. Even before the thunder fell silent, he knew this day would come. His extreme brand of tonism would be soon the dominant one. All those lesser tonists who believed in tranquility, tolerance, and passive acquiescence would soon die off and burn, just as the High Blade of Sub-Sahara would burn today. The time for words was gone, had been gone for a long time. If the curate had his way, language itself would be outlawed and replaced by wordless adulation to the tone, the toll, and the thunder, as it was meant to be, and he would be High Curate over all. Oh, what a glorious day that would be. But first, this. A scythe in a turquoise robe raced up a grand staircase, trying to escape. The curate pointed, and half a dozen of his flock raced after the scythe. Before him, a woman in a salmon silk robe who he recognized as Scythe Makeda was on the attack, skillfully gleaning the Tonists attacking her. Loyal and true, they were sacrificing themselves for the cause. Then one was able to get around behind Makeda and ran her through. She froze, gasped, and then fell like a rag doll, her fight leaving along with her life. 3 Tonists grabbed her body and dragged it out or toward the growing pyre outside in its purifying flames. You're no better than Goddard if you burn us, said one of the servants huddled at the base of the stairs with High Blade Ten Commandant. If you go through with this, the very thing you worship will never forgive you. The High Blade put a firm hand on her shoulder to keep her quiet, but her eyes were still angry and defiant. If the curate could speak, he would tell her that her words, all words, were an abomination to the tone, and that the only reason the tone didn't shatter her skull with furious resonance was because cleansing the world of the unworthy was left to the curate, and people like him. But he couldn't tell her, and he didn't have to. His actions spoke much more loudly than words. But the High Blade was all about words. Please, Ten Commandment begged. The curate knew what was coming next. This pompous, cowardly scythe, this purveyor of unnatural death, was now going to plead for his life. Let him plead. The curate's ears were not deaf, like some other sibilant sects, but they might as well be. Please, you can end me, but spare these two, Ten Commandment said. You have no gripe against this valet and housekeeper. The curate hesitated. It was his desire to end them all, for anyone in service to a scythe deserved a scythe's fate. Guilt by association. But then the High Blade said, show your followers the true meaning of mercy, the way my parents showed me, my mother and father, who are both among you. The curate knew this about the High Blade. His parents wordlessly begged not to be a part of the attack on the palace. He had obliged by sending them to the Firehouse, and they had clearly done their job well. Ten Commandment would not be spared, but out of respect for his Tonist spirits, the curate would honor the man's last words. So he pulled out a pistol, shot Ten Commandment through the heart, and then gestured for the two servants to leave. It was a humble offering of mercy. Of course, they would most likely be killed out in the gardens and thrown on the pyre, but the Ambijones were making off quite a few of the Deadish, so they'd have a fighting chance. But just then the housekeeper rose to her feet, the anger in her eyes beyond anger, beyond fury, and it was focus, like the eyes of a scythe. She leaped at the nearest Tonist, took her down with a skilled martial arts kick, grabbed the machete she was holding, and swung at the curate, disarming him. Literally. He watched stunned as his hand flew spinning into the air. Then she grabbed the gun from his severed hand, swung it to aim toward the curate. She didn't speak because her actions spoke much louder than words. 9. Lux Aeterna. Jericho had not trusted Anastasia's instincts, had not believed this was as serious as she made it out to be. It was a dreadful failure of judgment on Jerry's part. They could have escaped long before the outer wall was breached had Jerry only trusted Anastasia. The captain vowed never to doubt her again. If they survived, that is, and survival now would be a tall order indeed. As the Tonist broke into the palace, Jerry had convinced Anastasia to switch clothes. It is my job to protect you, Jerry begged. Please, Anastasia, let me do this for you. Do me the honor. As much as she didn't want to put Jerry in peril, when it was put to her in that way, she couldn't refuse. Once wearing Anastasia's robe, Jerry took off up the grand staircase, drawing away half the Tonist. Jerry did not know all the rooms and suites of the palace's upper levels, but knew them better than the attackers. Jerry led them into Scythe Anastasia's suite, then doubled back through a side door to an outer salon. The palace was enough of a maze to keep Jerry from being cornered too quickly, but that would only work for so long. Then came the sound of a gunshot from downstairs, then another. Not thinking about that now, the focus had to be keeping these Tonists out of the battle. Endless fires were being set throughout the palace by the invading Tonists. They lit the colonnade and upper suites in the angry, shifting light of frantic flames. The flames turned every shadow into a figure lurching from the darkness, but those shadows also provided Jerry with enough cover to dupe the pursuers and double back. Jerry ducked into another suite, but not being used to the robe, snagged it on a door jamb. Before Jerry could get it free, the Tonists were there, brandishing weapons, but they clearly were not trained to use. Jerry was no scythe, but had experience with fighting weapons. There had been a time, in fact, when Jerry would go to fighting clubs. People loved to see Madagascans fight. Somehow the ambiguity made the battle more intriguing. And today, these Tonists picked the wrong Madagascan. Anastasia had left a blade in one of the pockets of the robe. Jerry pulled it out and fought like never before. 10. The Bear-a-me. Anastasia missed. Blast it! She missed the curate. A young Tonist, seeing that her curate was about to be gleaned, pushed himself out of the way and took the bullet herself. And the curate, gripping the stub of his arm in pain, ran. He ran like a coward into the mob of Tonists still flooding the ground foyer. Ten Commandment was dead. So were Makeda and Baba. The Tonists who had seen her attack the curate were still stunned and unsure what to do. She was about to glean them all in a fury, but stopped herself because gleaning in anger was not the scythe way, and there was a more pressing matter. Jerry. She turned and ran up the stairs. No one pursued her. They were too busy setting fire to anything that would burn. She followed the sound of fighting to one of the unused guest suites. There were a few deadish sibilants and a trail of blood on the floor. She followed the trail to a bedroom where 3 more Tonists were attacking Jerry. Jerry was on the floor fending them off, but was outnumbered and was losing the battle. Anastasia gleaned the 3 Tonists with their own weapons and dropped the floor quickly, trying to assess Jerry's wounds. The turquoise robe was soaked with blood. She pulled it off and ripped it, trying to use pieces as a tourniquet. I heard gunshots, Jerry said. Jerry's wounds were too severe for the healing nanites to handle. They would not mend without help. Ten Commandment is dead, Anastasia said. He died protecting me. Perhaps, said Jerry weakly. Perhaps he was not as bad as I thought. If he were alive, I think he'd say the same about you. Thick smoke was already billowing through every open door. She helped Jerry out into the colonnade overlooking the atrium. Everything below them was burning. There was no way to get down the stairs. Then something occurred to her. A way out. Perhaps the only chance they had. Can you climb? She asked Jerry. I can try. Anastasia helped Jerry up to the next level, then through another suite to the balcony. Beside the balcony were ladder rungs embedded in the stone, which she had seen the workers use to access the bronze dome that covered the palace. One rung at a time, Anastasia got Jerry all the way up to the edge of the dome. It was designed with a gentle slope and patterned with textured divots and nubs that would give them footholds. But to Jerry, already exhausted from blood loss, it must have looked like Mount Everest. How will climbing up there? Just shut up and move, demanded Anastasia, not having time to explain. The dome was hot from the fire in the atrium below. Its glass skylights were already beginning to explode from the heat and belch forth black smoke. When they reached the pinnacle, there was a weather vane in the shape of the symbol of the scythedom, the curved blade and the unblinking eye. They pivoted left and right, not sure which way the winds were blowing because the heat was making the wind blow directly up. And now finally the scythedom helicopter arrived. It headed straight for the heliport, the pilots not yet knowing that it had been overrun by Tonists. It won't see us, said Jerry. That's not why we were up here. Then an ambidrone buzzed past them, and another, and another. They dropped toward the rose garden, which was littered with Dedish guards and Tonists. That's why we're here, Anastasia said. She tried to grab a drone, but it was moving too quickly. It wasn't close enough to grasp. Then below, the helicopter made a grievous error. Seeing the ambidrones buzzing around it, the pilot made a sudden evasive maneuver. It was unnecessary. The drones would stay far from the chopper's path, but they couldn't avoid a sudden flinch of human error that pulled the helicopter directly into their flight paths. The helicopter's blade sliced an ambidrone in two. The blade broke, and the helicopter came careening toward the palace. Anastasia grabbed Jerry and turned away. The explosion seemed to rock the entire world. It blew a hole in the palace, taking down several of the marble columns holding up the monstrously heavy bronze dome. And then the dome began to list to one side. Then from below came the awful vibration. It's the remaining columns, thought Anastasia. They can't hold the weight, they're crumbling. And still the ambidrones buzzed past them on their way to claim the deadish from the gardens and lawns. My wounds are bad, but they're not lethal, Jerry said. If we're going to attract an ambidrone, one of us must die. Flames now licked through the ruptured skylights. The sound of crashing columns from below and the dome was farther. Jerry was right. There was no way around it. So Anastasia pulled out a blade and aimed the tip towards her own chest, ready to render herself deadish so the ambidrone would come. But no. What was she thinking? How unbelievably stupid. It wasn't like hurling herself off Xenocrates' roof when she was just an apprentice. She was a scythe now. If she took her own life, it would be considered a self-gleaning. The ambidrones wouldn't come for her. And just as she pondered the idiocy of what she had almost done, Jerry gently took the blade from her. For you, honorable scythe Anastasia, I would die 1,000 deaths at my own hand, but one will be sufficient. Then Jerry thrust the blade inward. A gasp, a cough, a grimace, and Jerry was deadish. An ambidrone sped by, then stopped in mid-flight, doubled back, and came for Jerry. It seized the salvage captain in its pincers, and as it did, the dome began to give way. Anastasia grabbed for the ambidrone, but there was nothing to grip onto, so instead she gripped Jerry's arm with both hands as tightly as she could. Beneath her, the drone fell away, plunging into the flames, imploding into the atrium. It struck the ground, destroying what was left of the palace, and let off a powerful metallic resonance, like the toll of a funeral bell, like the final, mournful note of a requiem, while up above, the ambidrone carried away the deadish sea captain and the scythe dangling from the captain's arm, delivering them to a place that promised life to everyone who crossed through its doors. And that is the end of chapter 35. When next we come back to story time, we will read 36. These chapters are getting long. Yep. Next one's not as long. Won't be a 25-minute chapter, but hopefully you guys enjoyed. Thank you all so much for your support. Again, I hope you all are staying safe, healthy, and sane during quarantine. Today's topic to talk about in the comments. What was the first movie that you ever saw in theaters that you can remember? Because, I mean, mine was technically The Lion King, but I was only a couple months old. My dad really wanted to go see Lion King and wanted an excuse to go see it, so he brought his infant son with him. So, yeah, let me know down in the comments below. Please check out the links down below as well. Join the community, check out the merch, the Twitch, all that good jazz. Much love, and as always, stay freaky.